Hey everybody, Kara here with Self-Care Toolbox. I hope you don't mind I'm making this video in my bed today. I don't usually do this, but it's just that kind of day. I'm tired. I'm wrapping up a tech boot camp, which I'll probably make a video of pretty soon, but just getting some technical data analytics skills, and it's been really good. I'm down to the home stretch, so I'll share about that another time. Today's video is the first in a series that I wanted to make about moving. So in my adult life, I have made many big moves, I guess, and as a child, actually, I moved around a lot too, but I want to focus on what it's like to move as an adult. If you're thinking about moving, if you've ever dreamed of living in another place, maybe you're not sure where. Today's video is going to be more about contemplating other places and where might be a good place for you to live if you're thinking about moving and you're not sure, and how to know where and timing and things like that. And then in the future, I'm going to make some follow-up videos about logistics for moving, how to plan it, how to move your stuff, how to move yourself, how to move your family and your pet or whatever. So how to get settled into the new place. There's a lot of different costs associated, so I will be talking about that. So I grew up in Houston from the time I was 13 until I was 30. And then I always kind of wanted to leave Houston. I moved around a lot when I was a kid, right? And so by the time I got to Houston, I never really liked it there. And I was like, man, someday I'm going to be a grown-up and I'm going to pick where I get to be. And that's actually one of the things that I think is so great about living in the US is that you can travel and move so freely between the states. And that's actually a really cool thing. Each state has its own identity and character and weather and things to do. So it's pretty cool to be a US citizen or a resident and be able to take advantage of that if you can. Obviously, it's different for everyone depending on your financial situation and whether you have a family or not. My experience that I can speak to is moving as a single adult woman without any children, although one of the major moves I made, I was married. So I can talk about that when I get to the logistics part and what it was like to move with a partner and our 2 dogs. Oh, just to give you a background, so I was saying, I grew up in Houston, and then when I was 23 or 24, I decided I wanted to try to move to Washington State, where I settled on Washington State when I got a job opportunity, but I had been looking at both coasts a little bit, so I went to Washington State. Then I decided I wanted to come back to Texas, and I had a short stint in Austin before returning to Houston. At that time, I was not as experienced with moving. And that's one of the reasons I want to share this advice and insight with you guys, because I have made several big moves and most of the time I've been able to make it work. But that first one when I was 23, I was not prepared, and I had a wonderful and valuable experience. It was tough. And it didn't really work out, and I ended up coming back home, which is, sometimes we do that, right? Next, about 7 years later, I was married, and my husband and I planned to move to San Francisco. We were married in San Francisco. We had a destination wedding. We had traveled there twice a year for like 2 years, and we're like, let's do it. Let's move to San Francisco. So we did. And then the next major move I made, a smaller couple of moves in there. In the Bay Area, there's all these different cities. So my husband and I were living in Walnut Creek, which is in the East Bay. And when we separated, I decided to move to San Francisco. So that was a bit of a change. I decided to try my life in San Francisco, try my hand at life in San Francisco, and moved there. And several years later, the cost of living kept going up, and I had been commuting to Berkeley like an hour and a half each way to work by then, and I decided to move to Oakland because I could get my own apartment and ride my bike to work. So I did that, found an apartment, I moved to Oakland, which was very scary on its own because even though it was only a half an hour train ride from San Francisco, it was a completely new city to me. I was very intimidated about moving from San Francisco to Oakland. But anyway, I did that. And then years later, 4 years later, I decided I wanted to go to graduate school, and I'd been thinking about moving to Boston because I had family in the Boston area, and I always wanted to try out life on the East Coast and in the Northeast, and I'd taken some trips there. So when I applied to graduate school, I only applied to schools in the Boston area. I was determined just to try something new and be near my family, and they had some great programs for all the things that I wanted to do in Boston. So it aligned, and I got in and I went to Boston. So then when I graduated in May of 2020, right after the start of the pandemic, the economy was uncertain, and with all of the shutdowns and isolation, I'd been alone in my apartment for 3 months. I wasn't sure what the job outlook was going to be, and I had been praying for a long time. I'd been doing some serious contemplations about where to live, which I'll get into for you guys. And upon praying about it and thinking about it, I decided to go back to Houston for a little while, stay with my sister, and then figure out kind of next steps for my life. As the Lord would have it, I came back to Houston in June of 2020. And then this year, at the beginning of the year, my sister and her partner decided to move to Charleston, and they asked me if I wanted to come with them. So here I am. We moved to Charleston just a couple of weeks ago, and that was also a prayerful and thoughtful decision. So with all of these decisions I made, I actually know a lot about moving and figuring out where to go and how to do it, and so that's why I want to share it with you guys. So when thinking about moving, first thing I want to say, and I kind of already mentioned, I had been doing some prayers about it, but definitely pray about it. Whether you have an idea where you might want to go or you're completely open where you want to go, share that with God or meditate on it. Talk to people about it. You don't have to talk to everyone about it because people have opinions, especially if it comes to someone they love moving away. So keep that in mind when you seek advice. And if you're a Christian, seek godly advice, but definitely pray about it. Do not be rash or impulsive. Do not take the decision lightly. Moving is ranked as one of the most stressful things anyone can go through in their life ever at any given time. You know how there's like psychological scales where learned individuals in psychology rank, and it's like death of a spouse, divorce. Moving is like a really big one, and I think moving states especially. So I'm kind of focusing on moving states, but I think you can still apply some of the things that I'm saying if you're thinking about moving to another city within your state, especially if it's a large state, or just in another city within the same metropolitan area. Even some of the same considerations will apply. So think about it. Do self-reflect. Do research. Make lists. Consider a whole host of factors. I'm going to go into some of the factors to consider. I want to just walk you through some contemplations. You'll want to think about the population of the city or town. You probably have something that you're used to, and you may not know or feel that what your experience is what you really want. So take that into consideration, but you should know if you don't know, or try and figure out if you're a big city person or a small town person, or you like college towns. Think about the population of where you'd like to live and the things you like to do, and are they going to be crowded? Do you like crowds? Do you hate crowds? Are you energized by crowds? Are you stressed out by crowds? And that's going to help determine it too. Also, when you look at the population, you might look at how many people live there that are in your age group. I love college towns, but I'm in my 40s. So I may not want to be right smack in the middle of where everything you go to do is like super young people. I might want to find the bars or whatever people go hang out, where there might be people, middle-aged people there. Or are you single? You want to look at, are there single people there? Some towns, it's like most of the people are married compared to others. It just depends on the town. Do you want to be where the single people are? Does it matter to you if the people there are your age? So look at the demographics too. And while we're talking about demographics as well, one of the factors you should consider is diversity and racial relations in that specific place as well. How people of color are treated, how immigrants are treated there. If you'll get to interact with people of other cultures and faiths, if that's important to you. I mean, I'm a white person, obviously, but I've always lived and grown up in super diverse places. Inner city Chicago, Houston, Bay Area is fairly diverse. If you are a white person and you're used to diversity and you love diversity, you love going to businesses and events and interacting with people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, different nationalities, different religious views, you might feel out of place even being a white person moving to like white bread America, you know? Not that there's anything like off-putting, it's just like a personal preference, but also depending on who you are, how you might be treated by the locals. And some places too are more friendly towards outsiders than others. Having moved to Charleston, I saw it on multiple lists as a friendly place. It's actually ranked as a very friendly place. And yeah, I gotta say the people are really friendly here. They say hi to you on the street. That's kind of cool. Not the case in Boston. Boston's not like very friendly to me. I guess the locals are pretty friendly, but the people, there's a lot of transient people who are just there to get an education or do their job and then get out or make money, and like they're not as friendly. So yeah, so diversity is important. Cultural events, whether there's different kinds of people there or not, if you thrive on that, or if you want to be with people like you as well, then you can look at that too. So location, and I'll go into, this ties into lifestyle and weather and other things too, but one of the things about moving and why I would encourage people to move if you haven't ever and you've thought about it is because sometimes the grass is greener. People don't want you to think that, and typically if you grew up in one place, if you like commuting by bike, there's actually a variety of factors as well, because in the Bay Area, I could commute by my bike pretty much year round. But when I moved to Boston, I learned very quickly that summer was the best time to bike, and in other times of year, like the fall and spring where it could rain a lot, we got uncharacteristically really high rain. Sorry if you hear my nephew in the background. Yeah, his little baby. Actually, the majority of Americans grow up in one state and don't leave it. It's just very foreign to me because I've moved so much. But that said, think about what you like to have around you. What kind of scenery you would like to have. Do you like to be near water? Do you like wide open spaces? Flatlands? Do you like hills? Do you like mountains? You might not even know, but you can travel as you explore this as well. Because it actually is really important. It's not something that's talked about too much, I think, in terms of people's wellness and mental health and things like that. But your environment can have an impact on how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. So keep that in mind. Where do you want to be? What do you want to look at every day? If you're in a beautiful place and you're driving down the street and it's just like a regular street, you know, Boston had a lot of beautiful trees and reservoirs and the Charles River and parks. And I gotta say, spring, summer, fall, and winter, it was beautiful. And it was really nice. I was starting to think I was not a major city person, even though I've always lived in major metropolitan areas. But I love public transportation. I also love commuting by bike and being able to walk places. And so that is an individual thing. Some people love their cars, some people love driving places, some people don't want to sit next to strangers on the subway, and that's fine too. Houston, LA, you can live there without a car, but you really need a car. If you love your car and you don't mind sitting in traffic and you like those cities, then go for it. There's a handful of cities in the country that have the best public transit. I did my own research on that, and I've actually lived in a few of them. So, Bay Area, New York, Boston, DC, and Philly, I believe, have like the best public transit. It's important to look at the weather too if you like to commute by bike. Like I said, if you're in somewhere like Austin or the Bay Area, you can bike most of the year. But when I moved to Boston, I had a really rude awakening because I thought that winter for sure, once it started snowing, I couldn't ride my bike. But we got so much rain in the fall that I couldn't bike to work every day like I wanted to. And then you need a backup gym membership or something because you want to make sure you're still getting your exercise. And I like to get a twofer, right? I enjoy riding my bike, but I also do it for physical fitness. So for me, I like to just integrate my exercise into my daily life and walk and bike and stuff like that and not have to go to the gym. But there's times in Boston where because of the weather, you kind of have to go to the gym because it's too cold or too wet or slushy outside. And then with commuting by bike or walking, if you like to be able to walk to the store or a restaurant or a movie theater, take that into consideration. Unless you're a crazy marathon trainer, they run all year too. It's wild. I've seen them out there like when it's really cold training. So anyway, yes. So speaking of that, and I touched on the weather a little bit, but what type of weather do you like? Do you like rain? Do you like mist? Do you like thunderstorms? Do you like snow? Not just a little snow, but a lot of snow. You can make snowmen and hot cocoa. In the Bay Area, the weather was, they call it Mediterranean weather, so it was pretty much most of the time between 50 and 70, although sometimes it would get up to, they'd have a heat wave and then nobody has air conditioning. Or it would be like 40s or high 30s early in the morning or something like that. It did not thunderstorm there, and I love thunderstorms. So if you're a kind of person that likes to watch and listen to thunderstorms, you are not going to get it in San Francisco or Berkeley or Oakland or whatever. You'll get it in Boston, you'll get it in Houston for sure. Houston has hurricanes, and every year they terrify me. I'm afraid of water, I'm afraid of flooding. I'll take earthquakes, I guess, over that. So think about that. Think about the weather year-round and the extreme weather. And think about that in terms of your commute as well. If you're going to move somewhere that has snow, like Boston, but you can take the subway to work, that's actually okay. I mean, it can be kind of annoying when you have to wait for it or walk and it's cold, but you get a good enough coat and hat and scarf and everything. I wasn't bothered by it. I actually like the brisk walks in the cold, but I'm a weirdo. And if you're going to be driving to work somewhere that it snows, you have to get the ice off your windshield every day, and you have to dig your car out, sweep your driveway if you're a homeowner. When I was in Boston, I guess there's a rule. I thought my landlord was just being very kind to me because when it would snow, he would be up early and he would shovel a walkway from my front door, because I had a different entrance on the side of the house, to the whole driveway. So I had a place to walk through and get out of my house when we got some really heavy snow a few times. So I'd be like, thank you for shoveling the snow. Well, it turns out the landlords have to clear a pathway for their tenants. But if you're owning a house, guess who's going to be up early shoveling the snow so you can go to work? So that's something to think about. So moving and starting completely over is hard. It takes time and it takes a lot of work. So what some people would prefer is to have at least one or a handful of close loved ones, and that will really help ease the transition of the move and make you feel more at home sooner. But it's not out of the question to want to move somewhere just completely new and build a life and meet people. You can do that as well. When I moved to California, my ex-husband and I didn't actually know anyone in the Bay Area except he had one uncle who was elderly and married and had kids, but they were in like the North Bay. They weren't in San Francisco proper. and his uncle actually died before we moved there, but we would still meet with his widow and the children who were grown. They were like our age, once in a while, but we didn't see them very often, and that was it. We had no friends there. We had friends in LA that sounded so close and like we would visit them, but not really. I mean, I had friends in LA. The whole time I lived in the Bay Area, I only went to LA a few times to visit. It was probably about 6-hour drive, so it's not like you can just go every weekend or whatever. Same with when I moved to Boston though. I had an aunt and uncle. My dad grew up in that area, so they were out in the suburbs and had a really long commute to school. But when I first moved to Boston, I stayed with them, and it was so nice just to be with my family and be in a loving environment when otherwise I was a stranger in a strange land in a very stressful program. That being said, my aunt and uncle were out in the suburbs, and it was a really long commute to get to school every day and stuff. Then when I finally moved into the city and was finishing my program and working and doing internship and stuff, I hardly ever got to go see them. So that was tough. So look at it really realistically. Who do you know there? Are you actually gonna hang out with them, see them? Are they gonna be close enough to make a difference? Sometimes people move places together, whether it's a buddy, a friend, a significant other, and that can definitely, make a difference. One of my friends in grad school was from Philly, and she and her best friend from like undergrad had both applied to graduate school in Boston and moved to Boston together. So they had a nice like social circle from the get-go. Or you move somewhere that you have a good friend, cousin, family member. If not, reach out to people you know. Moving to Charleston, it's a pandemic, so I'm not really getting out meeting people, but so many people, even though I didn't know anyone here besides my sister, I've had a lot of friends and former coworkers and things say, hey, I have family and friends there, I'll introduce you and I'll be there to visit, and yeah, let me connect you to this person, my cousin or let me tell you about this restaurant, So that's pretty cool. See what ties you might have to a place that you don't even know about. Another consideration is thinking about your lifestyle. What's important to you? What do you like to do? And it's so important, right up there with the weather and the scenery. I mean, what we're talking about today is pie in the sky. Like, if you could go anywhere and you could figure out where that should be, if God wants you to be somewhere, if you want to be somewhere and the stars can align and you can get there, what's your pie in the sky? If you're an outdoorsy type person and you like walking and hiking and all of those things, pick a place where you can do that. Ride bikes. If you like to go to the beach, go somewhere that has a beach. Doesn't have to be on the coast. Michigan has beaches. Wisconsin has beaches. There's rivers, lakes, all over the country. Really beautiful places. So many beautiful places. And think about it. And do you like art? Do you like live music? I'm a musician. If you want to be somewhere where there's a thriving singer-songwriter scene or independent music scene, check into that. How many live music venues are there? How many shows are there? How many open mics are there? Are you a big art fan? What sort of art museums are there? Do you like history? Are there historical attractions? Boston and Charleston have tons of historical attractions. DC has the Smithsonian. It is 19 free museums. So when it's hot in the summer, you can just go to these museums for free. So think about that. What do you like to do? Do you like to travel? If so, or if you're not going to be near family and you know that at least a few times a year you're going to want to catch a flight somewhere to meet up with your family, then you want to be, someone brought this to my attention when I was thinking about where to live, you want to be near a major airport. You don't necessarily want to have to drive 3 hours to get to an airport to catch a flight, or be by a tiny airport that has no direct flights anywhere and it's always going to be more expensive and longer flights. So something to consider if you really like to travel. If you like to travel internationally, do they have an international airport? How easily can you get to Europe? How easily can you get to Hawaii? When you're on the East Coast, for example, I was able to fly to Paris from Boston in 6 hours. But also, when I lived in San Francisco, I was able to fly to Hawaii and meet some friends in 3 hours. So, where do you like to be? What do you like to do? That being said, the shorter the flight, the cheaper the flight as well. So being in the Northeast, it's a cheaper and shorter flights to the UK and Europe and wherever else. And if you're on the West Coast, yeah, you can go to Hawaii, you can go to Alaska, Seattle, things like that. Are there places you want to go within road tripping distance? Check it out. See. Oh yeah, and if you like to go shopping, does it have the shopping you like to do? If you really love, if you're kind of a foodie, what's the food scene like there? These things do make tiny differences depending on what you really like doing. Pick a place that's gonna like feed your soul, you know, on a daily basis, a place that you feel good to be there. You feel satisfied to go out and do the things that you love. And where even if you don't have a lot of money, there are places where there's so much to do, regardless, and you can have a really wonderful time. San Francisco, everyone talks about how expensive it is, and we'll get into how to choose a place to live within these places. But one of the things San Francisco has going for it is that your apartment may not have the square footage, but how many parks and beautiful places are nearby. And that is what people do. They walk and bike and meet at the parks and meet at the beaches and bring music and snacks and whatever and just chill and enjoy the weather or play sports or something. Oh yeah, and I mentioned, do you know anyone? Do you not know anyone? If you don't know anyone, how will you meet people there? We'll get into this more when we talk about logistics and adjusting to the new place in later videos, but it's a good thing to be thinking about with this video too. If you don't know anyone there, how are you going to meet people? Are you going to join a church? Are you going to join a meetup? Are you going to get out? Is there a specific community there that's really happening, like a live music community, a church community, a meditation community, professional organizations? Think about that and what's there. Now on to cost, which is big. But I don't want you to hold limiting beliefs about, I can afford this, that, or the other. Because if you really want to be somewhere and it's part of God's will, then He will enable you to make it happen. If it's prayerfully and with gratitude, then you can make it. And you can be content and you can appreciate whatever it is that you have in your new place, even if you can't always, go to concerts and restaurants or things like that. So breaking down the cost considerations, you can do comparisons of costs for cities online. You can Google cost comparison calculators for cities. You can put in one city and another city, and you can put your current income in your current city and find out how much you need to make in that new city. And it will also kind of break down percentage wise how much more is housing, how much more is healthcare, food, transportation. But don't stop there. That information is actually very, very limited. So that is something you can do to get yourself an idea. But another way to do it, and a fun way, I think, is to imagine yourself there and go apartment shopping online and look at apartments and houses, whether you want to rent or whether you want to buy, learn about the neighborhoods, and think about things like, do you want to rent or own? How many bedrooms are you going to need? How much square footage are you going to need, right? Cheaper places, smaller cities, Texas, whatever. You can get a much bigger place. In Houston, my sister had a 4-bedroom house for her and her daughter, for what in San Francisco I'd be happy to get a studio. However, there's other advantages to living there, and only you can decide what you really want. Don't just stop at the cost of living comparison calculators and looking at apartments. When you look at apartments or houses to buy, you can get a better idea of, I want to be in this neighborhood. I want to be right by the water. I want to be downtown. How much is it going to cost you to get the place that you want exactly where you want it? And really think about where you would like to be versus other options. And then for buying a house, you want to look at not just what the cost of the home is, but what is the interest rates right now? What would it rent for? Are there other fees that you need to know about? What do the taxes cost? What is the insurance cost? Is there homeowners association? How much does the homeowners association cost? Now, when you look at properties in South Carolina, they actually have really low taxes and really low interest rates, and they don't have the HOA things. So where the house might be more expensive itself, the taxes you pay mostly here are sales tax. So look at the differences between states and how they do their taxes. In Texas, if you own a home, you pay a lot for taxes. The state gets a lot of its money from property taxes. Then in addition to property taxes, there's homeowners association, which depending on what part of Houston you want to be in or what part of the state you want to be in, it's another anywhere between $400 and $1,000 a month tacked onto your mortgage to pay to be a part of the homeowners association. So take all of that in consideration, not just what your mortgage would be, to get a better idea of what you'd be paying to buy property there. And then also, is it pet friendly? Some cities are pet friendly, you can have dogs, cats, whatever. Other cities, it's hard to find a place and it can cost extra for having a pet. So for example, I did see my last stint in Houston that they're starting to do this and like limit pets and charge pet rent, but it's still kind of rare. Whereas when I was living in San Francisco and Boston, there were most apartments didn't allow for pets at all, and then some cats and very few for dogs. And especially if you have a large dog, you will have the hardest time finding a place in certain cities. I have a small dog. He's like a little 12-pound poodle mix, and I still had a really hard time oftentimes finding apartments that would allow my dog. And then I was lucky though, I found places where I never had to pay pet rent, but that was rare too. A lot of places that do accept dogs and cats will tack on like $25, $30, $50 a month for pet rent. So to pay on top of your rent, pay for your pet to live there. Just crazy. And then the deposit can be more too. And then some places too, when you move in, will charge you first months and that's it, or deposit in first months, and other places will charge you deposit, first months, last month, whatever. And those tend to be, I think, depending on the area and the region and state and all of that. So take a look and see what's it going to cost you to get into a place. Oh yeah, and just other factors in looking at where you might like to live within the general area that you're looking at are, like I said, walkability, bikeability. Is there, a corner store or whatever? When I lived in Oakland, my neighborhood was mostly residential, but I had all the things within a mile that I really wanted to be able to go to. Like I had a couple of coffee shops, a pizza place, a diner. I'd go for breakfast sometimes or to get pie, my dry cleaner, and a grocery store. So I had like a lot of the essential things I needed within a mile. And then if I went within 4-mile bike ride, 2 to 4 miles, I could get to downtown Berkeley or downtown Oakland and get all kinds of things like that. So even though I was in a more residential area, everything was still pretty close. So yeah, do your cost of living comparisons. Check out the weather, check out what there is to do there and all of these things that I've discussed. Do your research, daydream, travel, visit, talk to locals, and just think about it. Think about it and think about it and think about it and make your lists and do your homework. And then I think it's going to become clear, especially if you pray about it and you ask God to show you where you're supposed to go. And don't forget about timing. I said at the beginning of this video not to rush it or do anything rash. But if you pick the right place and you plan, which is what I'll talk about in the next video, is a little bit more about planning and logistics, then you can set yourself up on a pathway to be successful in your new home, in your new city, and build the life that you want, and with God's blessing and enabling you to get there along the way. So I hope this video helped you. Stay tuned for the next one, talking about logistics and moving once you decide where you want to be. Feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know how this helped or didn't help you, or anything you'd like to hear more about. And I'll see you guys next time. And I thank you so much for joining me today. Be well. Bless you.